That ain't a soldier's tattoo. That's prison ink. The young recruit spat the words without looking up, just loud enough for the others to hear. Laughter followed. 3 voices, sharp and cruel. She didn't flinch. She just rolled her shoulder, revealing more of the black spiral etched near her collarbone. That's when everything changed. One officer dropped his tablet. Another reached for his radio with trembling fingers. Within minutes, sirens howled across the base, and the woman they mocked for wearing a tank top, she became a federal trigger. This is Veteran Biker. Comment where you're watching from, and let's begin. The relentless Arizona sun beat down on the sprawling tarmac of Phoenix Valley Air Base. The heat shimmered off the metal hulls of drones parked in neat rows, casting long shadows beneath the sprawling wings. In the maintenance bay, Marla Vega adjusted her gloves, already slick with sweat, and pulled off her flight jacket, revealing a worn tank top beneath. Her bare arms glistened under the harsh light, muscles taut from years of labor, and a tattoo near her right shoulder blade caught the sun, a twisting double helix interlaced with strange glyphs. To most it was an unrecognizable pattern, a cryptic design lost to time and memory. But to those who knew, it was a signature, a scar, etched into flesh and history. Marla moved with the precision of someone who had spent decades amid the hum of machines and the roar of engines. At 44, she was no stranger to exhaustion, yet she still commanded respect in a field dominated by youth and rapid turnover. Today, however, the weight she bore went beyond the physical. Beneath her calm exterior simmered a past no one was ready to confront. Across the bay, 3 young airmen leaned against a bulkhead, their attention fixed on their phones. The tallest of the 3, a cocky private named Daniels, nudged his companions and nodded toward Marla. "Check out the old lady in the tank top," he whispered loud enough to be heard. "Bet she thinks she's still in the war." His friends chuckled, raising their phones to record. "Look at that tattoo," one said, voice dripping with mockery. "Looks like she picked it up in prison." Daniels laughed, stepping closer to Marla's workspace. "Hey, tank top girl, what's the story behind the ink? You some kind of gang member or what?" Marla didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the fuel valves, fingers steady as she performed the meticulous checks required. The insult stung, but it was nothing new. Years of covert torment had honed her silence into armor. "You don't know what you're looking at," she said quietly, voice low but firm. The youngest airman smirked. "That's the point. Nobody here does. Maybe it's a prison tattoo, or maybe it's just some dumb symbol." Daniel stepped even closer, grinning. "Or maybe she's hiding something worse, like some cancelled weapon program." A hush fell over the trio as their laughter ceased abruptly. Marla's gaze flicked to them briefly, her eyes sharp and unyielding. "You have no idea." Behind them, the drone engines whirred softly, oblivious to the tension in the air. Daniels raised his phone again, aiming it at Marla's exposed shoulder. "Let's get a closer look. Maybe the brass will want to see what their old tech is hiding." Marla's jaw tightened. She knew what this meant. The exposure of her tattoo could unravel everything she had spent years burying beneath layers of denial and forgotten files. She wiped the sweat from her brow, steadied her breath, and resumed her work. The drone systems hummed beneath her hands, a delicate dance of wires and algorithms. But in the depths of her mind, a storm was gathering. Because that tattoo was more than ink. It was a mark of survival, a symbol of a weaponized past erased from official records, and a warning. Marla paused a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle like a thick fog around her. The sun scorched her exposed skin, but the fire beneath her tattoo was older, deeper, and far colder. That symbol, twisted and intricate, wasn't a decoration. It was a testament, a ghost from a chapter she'd fought to keep buried. Behind her, the faint buzz of radios mixed with the clatter of tools and the sharp footsteps of technicians going about their business. Yet amidst the mechanical symphony, the jeers of the young soldiers cut through the air, an unrelenting tide of mockery and ignorance. One of them, a wiry private with a sneer, muttered loud enough for her to catch, "Bet she thinks she's the hero from some cancelled program no one remembers." His friends snickered, and the phones rose like weapons ready to capture her discomfort. Marla's fingers tightened around the wrench. She remembered the long hours in cold briefing rooms, the erased records, the hushed conversations where her name was never spoken aloud. She was a survivor of Gorgon 7, the ill-fated neural interface project designed to merge human cognition with unmanned combat vehicles, a program deemed too dangerous, too unstable, and quietly buried after too many lives were lost. The irony wasn't lost on her. The very program that had cost her everything was now the cause of whispered rumors and snide jokes in the same airbase where she was reduced to a target of derision. She breathed deeply and spoke without turning. "It's more than you think. This tattoo, it's the last trace of a war no one wants to remember." Daniel snorted. "A war that ended before we were born." "What's the big deal, old-timer? You're just a relic." His words hit a nerve, but Marla held her ground. Years of training taught her that strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was measured in the silence between words. She shifted her weight and adjusted the fuel injector. The drone's engine thrummed beneath her touch, a reminder of progress and destruction entwined. Nearby, a supervisor approached, her eyes scanning the tension between Marla and the young soldiers. Without a word, she gave a curt nod toward Marla and whispered, "Ignore them. Keep to your task." Marla glanced up briefly, gratitude flickering in her tired eyes. She had allies, even if few and far between. As the sun climbed higher, the temperature soared. Sweat trickled down her spine, mingling with the ache in her shoulders, a mix of physical fatigue and the invisible scars left by years of erasure. The three soldiers exchanged glances, emboldened by their camaraderie, but unaware of the storm their ignorance was about to unleash. Suddenly, the sharp crackle of an announcement over the base PA system shattered the uneasy calm. "Attention all personnel, Colonel Thomas Kincaid will conduct an immediate inspection of UAV maintenance protocols in Hangar 3. All relevant staff report to designated stations." Marla's heart quickened. Kincaid wasn't just any colonel, he was the gatekeeper of the secrets she carried, the man who had approved the erasure of her records years ago. Her eyes flicked back to the tattoo, peeking from under her tank top. The mark that shouldn't exist. Today, the past would not remain buried. The drone engine's steady drone mingled with the distant buzz of approaching footsteps, footsteps that would soon cross the boundary between oblivion and reckoning. Under the relentless Arizona sun, Marla Vega wiped the sweat from her brow and adjusted her gloves. The metal hulls of the drones reflected the bright light, casting stark shadows across the tarmac of Phoenix Valley Air Base. She peeled off her worn flight jacket, revealing a simple tank top beneath, the fabric clinging to her skin in the scorching heat. Her exposed shoulder bore a tattoo, a twisting double helix intertwined with cryptic symbols, a mark few could understand. To most, it was just ink. To Marla, it was a symbol of survival and forgotten battles, a relic from a weapon program erased from history. Marla moved with practiced precision, inspecting the fuel lines and engine components of a UAV. At 44, her years of experience lent her steady hands and a calm demeanor, but beneath her quiet exterior simmered a past shadowed by secrets and silence. Nearby, three young airmen lounged by a bulkhead, their phones raised, whispering and snickering. "Look at the tank-top lady," one jeered. "Doesn't she know she's not in basic anymore?" The others laughed, filming her in derision. "Check out that tattoo," another said. "Looks like prison ink or gang marks. What's she trying to prove?" Marla's eyes flicked briefly toward them. She said softly, "You have no idea." Undeterred, the tallest private stepped closer, mocking, "Hey, tank top girl, what's with the ink? Some cancelled weapon program or what?" She kept working. Saya lends her shield. The sun beat down harder as the young soldier's taunts grew louder, phones aimed to capture every moment. Marla knew the risks. That tattoo, her secret, could unravel everything she had spent years hiding, but she would not let ignorance define her story. The drone's steady hum was a reminder of progress and destruction entwined. She tightened her grip on the wrench, breathing in resolve. The past was coming to light, and she would face it on her own terms. A sharp announcement crackled over the base's PA system. Colonel Thomas Kincaid to Hangar 3 for immediate inspection. Her heart skipped. Kincaid, the man who had erased her existence from official records, was coming. Today, under the merciless sun, the buried past was about to awaken. The roar of a helicopter sliced through the relentless heat of the Phoenix Valley sky as Colonel Thomas Kincaid's black transport touched down on the tarmac. His arrival was never casual. A man used to control and secrecy, Kincaid carried with him the weight of classified projects and the legacy of buried truths. Today, he came with a purpose. A mission to inspect the maintenance protocols of the UAVs stationed here, to assure the higher-ups that the program was progressing as planned. Kincaid moved swiftly through the sprawling hangar, his crisp uniform stark against the grease-stained coveralls of the technicians. His keen eyes scanned the area, taking in the hum of machinery and the focused faces of the airmen and engineers around him. His gaze suddenly halted, drawn, almost magnetically, to a figure bent over a drone's fuel system, Marla Vega, the same woman he had hoped to keep erased. There, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights and sweat-soaked skin, the tattoo on her exposed shoulder revealed itself in stark defiance. The intertwined double helix with strange symbols, the biological ID once wiped from records, was unmistakable. Kincaid's breath hitched, his skin grew pale. Years of carefully constructed lies, of silences and cover-ups seemed to fracture in that instant. Pulling out his phone with a trembling hand, he tapped rapidly, his voice clipped and urgent. "Security alert, level 3. Immediate lockdown and full sweep of Hangar 3. All personnel remain at their stations. Secure all terminals." The announcement crackled through the loudspeakers, triggering a surge of activity. Red lights blinked to life, gates slammed shut, and armed guards moved into position. Marla looked up, sensing the sudden shift in the atmosphere. A squad of security officers approached, their faces unreadable but resolute. An officer stepped forward, holding out a badge. "Miss Vega, Colonel Kincaid requests your presence in the secure briefing room. Immediate compliance required." Without hesitation, Marla nodded, leaving her tools behind and following the escort through a maze of corridors and secured doors. The room was stark and cold, illuminated by harsh white light that seemed to expose every secret. Inside waited Kincaid, his expression a mixture of fury and disbelief. "Explain this," he demanded, gesturing sharply at her shoulder. Marla met his gaze steadily.
"This mark exists because I exist. Despite your efforts to erase me..."
Kincaid's jaw clenched. The air grew thick with tension, the past and present colliding in that sterile room. Her presence here, her tattoo visible, challenged the very fabric of the program he had tried to bury. "Your continued existence is a liability," he said quietly. "A breach." Marla's eyes hardened. "I am not your liability. I am the warning." Outside, the security systems hummed with unyielding vigilance. Inside, the battle for truth had only just begun. The air in Hangar 3 thickened with tension as the security alert blared across the base. Red lights flashed urgently, and the hum of machinery was now overshadowed by the cacophony of commands and rushing footsteps. Soldiers snapped to attention, while technicians froze mid-task, their faces reflecting the sudden shift from routine to crisis. Colonel Thomas Kincaid strode into the center of the hangar, his presence commanding immediate deference. His gaze swept the crowded space before narrowing to a single point, Marla Vega standing alone, her tank top clinging to sunburned skin, the intricate tattoo on her shoulder starkly visible. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, disbelief mingling with a flash of panic. Years of effort to bury this chapter threatened to unravel in an instant. Kincaid's voice was a harsh whisper into his radio. Initiate lockdown. Secure all sensitive areas. Locate Marla Vega immediately. Marla's eyes locked with his from across the bay. The recognition was undeniable. No words passed, but in that glance lay the weight of history. Secrets, betrayals, and lives erased. Two security officers appeared at her side. Their badges gleamed under the harsh hangar lights as one spoke curtly. "Colonel Kincaid requires your presence in the secure briefing room. We'll escort you." Marla nodded without hesitation, dropping her tools on the bench with a soft clang. The corridor was a maze of steel and surveillance cameras, every door locked and guarded as they moved deeper into the heart of the base. In the sterile confines of the briefing room, Kincaid stood by a large screen displaying schematics of drones and neural interface technology. His sharp eyes didn't waver as he gestured toward her tattoo. "That symbol," he began, voice cold, "was expunged from all official records over a decade ago. Your presence here is an anomaly." Marla met his gaze steadily, unflinching. "I am no anomaly. I am the last living witness to Gorgon 7. Kincaid's jaw tightened. "Your existence is a risk, a breach of security and protocol." She folded her arms, voice steady and resolute. "I am not your breach. The lies and erasures are." A tense silence filled the room. Outside, the lockdown continued, alarms muted, but the atmosphere was thick with unease. Kincaid finally spoke. "You will remain here for questioning. Full debriefing protocol applies." Marla's expression hardened. "I will cooperate, but under legal representation, and with full transparency." The colonel nodded once. "We'll see." As the security teams moved to secure the area and isolate the room, Marla felt the weight of the moment. The program that had tried to erase her, and the truth, was waking up. This was only the beginning. The interrogation room was stark and unforgiving. Cold fluorescent lights humbly exposing every wrinkle, every anxious breath. Marla Vega sat rigidly at the metal table, her hands folded neatly, but her eyes sharp, flickering between the door and the faces of the team of engineers and officers assembled. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and a history no one wanted to face. The lead interrogator, a stern-faced woman with sharp glasses and a clipboard, flipped open Marla's file on the table. The screen beside them displayed a digital image of the tattoo on Marla's shoulder, a complex double helix wrapped around cryptic symbols that no longer appeared in any current database. Instead, the bio-ID was flagged as restricted, terminated Project Gorgon 7. A younger technician hesitated, his fingers trembling as he toggled through corrupted files and redacted logs. "There's no accessible data." "Only warning flags and incomplete records." Kincaid stepped forward, his presence a shadow of command and regret. That bio-ID was part of a neural interface program designed to integrate human cognition with unmanned aerial vehicles. The project was scrapped after catastrophic neurological damage was discovered in test subjects. The official line is clear: project terminated, data purged. Marla's voice was quiet but unwavering. "I'm not a test subject. I'm a survivor." She met Kincaid's eyes. "I never agreed to be erased." The room stiffened. "You were never meant to exist in official records. You were a liability to the program and to the command structure," Kincaid said flatly. Marla shifted slightly, pain flickering behind her calm. The experiment failed because you ignored the risks. My colleagues are dead, their sacrifices silenced. A murmur ran through the group. Kincaid's expression darkened. The program was shut down for the greater good. Your involvement was classified, necessary for national security. But my survival is proof that the cost was too high, Marla countered, that the risks you buried are still alive. Here, she tapped her tattoo, and in the drones you continue to test. One of the senior engineers leaned in. We've seen anomalies in UAV behavior linked to unregulated neural feedback loops, unauthorized code usage. Marla nodded. Because the system's core was never truly dismantled. It was shelved, yes, but its legacy haunts every new iteration. The room was silent but for the low hum of the ventilation. Kincaid folded his arms, voice dropping to a cold warning. You will cooperate fully, and the truth will be contained. Marla's stare was icy. Or it will be exposed. Hours passed with relentless questioning, technical data analysis, and veiled threats. Marla refused to break, her silence a fortress. The bio-ID was more than a tattoo. It was a beacon calling the ghosts of Gorgon 7 out of hiding. When the interrogation ended, Marla was left alone to contemplate the price of survival and the burden of a truth no one dared face. Marla sat back as the door clicked shut behind the last interrogator, leaving her alone in the cold room. The weight of silence pressed down, heavier than any question thrown her way. The sterile white walls seemed to close in, reflecting her own restless thoughts. She traced her fingers lightly over the faded tattoo on her shoulder. A mark once hidden beneath layers of secrecy and denial, now illuminated under harsh scrutiny. It was more than ink. It was her story, a story erased from every official ledger and database. Yet here it was, undeniable and raw. Outside the room, the base was in turmoil. The Level 3 security alert had unsettled even the most seasoned personnel. Whispers coursed through the corridors like an electric current, carried by curious glances and hushed conversations. The ghost of Gorgon 7 is back, one technician murmured, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. Marla's mind drifted back to those dark days when the program had promised a revolution in warfare. Neural control of drones was meant to give soldiers an edge, a seamless extension of the human mind. But that promise had come with a terrible cost. Test subjects had suffered neurological breakdowns. Some had died, others vanished. Marla had volunteered, driven by a desperate hope to save her brother, who had died testing the very technology she now bore as a scar. The memories were painful yet vivid. The endless hours in the sterile labs, the constant hum of machines monitoring brain activity, the shock waves of electric stimuli coursing through her nervous system. Her body remembered the chaos of the final test, a malfunction that left her burned, broken, and officially dead on paper. But Marla was alive, and she carried the truth beneath her skin. Her reverie was interrupted by the door sliding open again. 2 security officers appeared, nodding curtly before gesturing for her to follow. As she walked through the labyrinthine halls, Marla passed familiar faces, engineers, soldiers, technicians, their eyes averted or filled with cautious curiosity. She was an enigma to them now, both a relic and a warning. The escort led her to a smaller, dimly lit room. Here, a younger woman sat behind a table cluttered with documents and digital tablets. She introduced herself quietly as Lieutenant Natalie Zhou, a systems analyst assigned to review the project files. Natalie glanced up, meeting Marla's gaze. "I've heard stories about you." Marla gave a faint nod. Not all stories are true, but some truths refuse to die. Together, They pored over fragmentary records, corrupted files, redacted reports, schematic blueprints of neural interfaces and drone control systems. The deeper they delved, the clearer the evidence that despite official termination, parts of Gorgon 7 technology had been resurrected in secret experiments.
Someone's running unauthorized tests, Natalie said grimly, using code fragments from your old program.
Marla's jaw tightened. That's why I recorded every meeting, every anomaly. I knew this day would come. Her voice carried the weight of months spent in silence, watching the shadows grow longer, waiting for the moment to strike. Natalie looked at her, respect evident. You're not alone. There are others who want the truth out. Marla allowed herself a rare, brief smile. Then let's make sure they hear it. As they prepared to confront the ghosts of Gorgon 7 together, Marla felt the flicker of a fight rekindling, not just for herself, but for the countless unseen casualties buried beneath classified files and forgotten promises. Marla leaned back against the cold wall of the dimly lit room, the hum of the base's distant machinery a steady backdrop to the turmoil inside her mind. She traced the faded edges of her tattoo with a quiet reverence, a symbol of survival that no one else was meant to see, a scar etched by secrets and sacrifice. Her eyes drifted to the scattered documents on the table, corrupted data files, redacted reports, incomplete schematics. Each one a testament to the broken promises of Gorgon 7, a program that had cost lives and shattered futures. Yet here she was, the last living link to a chapter the military had tried to erase. Natalie Joe's voice broke through her thoughts. We have to act carefully. The people behind this revival won't take kindly to exposure. Marla nodded slowly, determination hardening in her gaze. They underestimated what survives in the shadows. The path ahead was fraught with danger and deception, but for the first time in years, Marla felt the weight of silence beginning to lift. She was no longer alone in the fight to reveal the truth. As the door slid closed behind her, sealing the room from the outside world, Marla's resolve crystallized. The ghosts of Gorgon 7 were waking, and she was ready to face them. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice. The sterile interrogation room remained cold, but within Marla Vega, a storm brewed, one fueled by memories long buried and wounds that never fully healed. She sat upright, the sharp fluorescent light casting hard shadows across her determined face. Across the table, Colonel Thomas Kincaid watched her with an inscrutable expression, half frustration, half calculation. You owe us the truth, Miss Vega, Kincaid said, voice clipped. Why did you volunteer for Gorgon 7? And why are you still here, defying all orders to remain classified? Marla inhaled slowly, gathering the fragments of a story that had nearly destroyed her. My brother, she began, voice low, steady. He was an engineer on the UAV project, one of the brightest minds at Halberd. Her gaze hardened. He died because of a signal failure during a test flight, a failure that could have been prevented if the risks we raised had been taken seriously. Kincaid's jaw tightened imperceptibly. Accidents happen in development, Miss Vega. You volunteered for Gorgon 7 knowing the dangers. Marla's eyes flared. I volunteered to make sure no one else would die like him. She paused, fingers tracing the edge of her sleeve to reveal the tattoo that had haunted her every step, the intertwined helix, her bio-ID etched deep in pain and promise. That tattoo, she said, voice barely above a whisper, is a reminder. A promise that I will carry on to expose what was done and to protect those who still suffer. Kincaid looked away, discomfort flickering across his features. You were erased. Your records were wiped. Your existence is denied for your own safety and the integrity of the program. Marla's lips tightened. Erased, yes, but I am not gone. Her voice rose slightly, infused with the fire of years spent in silence. You authorized my removal from every database. I was terminated on paper to hide the failures and protect your careers. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the ventilation. The interrogators shifted uneasily, but none dared speak. Marla continued. They thought if I disappeared, the program's ghosts would vanish with me. Her eyes locked on Kincaid's, but they underestimated what it means to survive. She pulled out a small folder from beneath the table and slid it toward him. These are the reports, the emails, the complaints I filed. Ignored, suppressed, buried. Kincaid studied the folder but said nothing. Marla leaned forward. I carved that tattoo not just as a mark, but as a message. I was here, I endured, and I will not be forgotten. Her gaze softened momentarily. I volunteered to test the neural interface because I believed in the promise of protection, but when the promise turned to pain, I was abandoned. Her voice cracked briefly, the weight of betrayal pressing down. I was told to be silent, to live as a ghost. But every day I lived was a challenge to the lie. Kincaid's expression hardened, a flicker of guilt masked by cold resolve. The program was too dangerous. It had to be stopped. Marla's eyes burned. Stopped, yes, but not forgotten, and certainly not buried. She sat back, exhaustion mingling with fierce defiance. There are others like me still in the shadows. I know the experiments didn't end when the project was cancelled. She glanced toward the closed door, as if sensing unseen ears. They're trying to resurrect the code, the neural algorithms, without the safeguards, without regard for human cost. The room held its breath. Kincaid's voice dropped to a near whisper. You have no proof. Marla's hand hovered over a small recorder on the table. I have months of recordings from internal meetings, technical briefings, and whispered conversations. She pressed play. A low murmur filled the room. Voices discussing unauthorized code, escalating tests, and attempts to bypass ethical controls. Enough, Kincaid barked, silencing the playback. Marla met his glare. You can try to silence me, but the truth is louder than your protocols. She stood, eyes blazing. I will expose what you tried to hide, for my brother, for myself, and for those who cannot speak. Kincaid's fists clenched. You will regret this. Marla smiled coldly. I have nothing left to lose. The standoff lingered as tension cracked the sterile air. Marla's journey from erased volunteer to a living reckoning had only just begun. Marla sat in the dim light of her small quarters, the faint glow of a laptop screen illuminating her tired face. For months now, she had lived a double life, a quiet technician by day and a vigilant recorder by night. Every meeting she attended, every whispered conversation she overheard, was carefully documented and stored in encrypted folders hidden deep within the base's network. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone, positioning it to capture the hushed voices of the engineers gathered in the conference room. The topic was unspoken but unmistakable: the resurrection of the very code that had nearly cost her life, the neural interface technology of Gorgon 7. Gentlemen, a young engineer's voice began, the recent tests on drone responsiveness using the old neural code have shown promising results. We're close to achieving real-time neural command without latency. Marla's heart pounded. This was what she feared. The code was not only being used, but pushed forward, ignoring the ethical warnings buried in the ashes of the original project. Another voice chimed in, we need to keep this quiet. The brass doesn't want any leaks. Remember what happened last time with the public fallout? Marla nodded silently to herself. That public fallout had nearly erased her existence. As the voices faded, she carefully stopped the recording, encrypting the file and marking it urgent. The risks were immense. Discovery meant termination, not just of her job, but potentially her freedom. Yet the truth was a weapon she wielded with quiet precision. In the weeks that followed, Marla compiled a growing archive, audio files of internal meetings, emails detailing unauthorized modifications to UAV control systems, and technical blueprints revealing the neural feedback loops traced directly back to the original Gorgon 7 algorithms. She reached out discreetly to an old contact, a former engineer named Clarissa Miles, who had left the military and now worked as a civilian analyst. Clarissa was skeptical but understood the stakes. "I'll help," Clarissa said, her voice firm. "This needs to go public. But carefully. We expose too much too fast and they'll bury everything and us with it." Together they refined the data, cross-referencing files and verifying sources. Clarissa's network of trusted journalists included one military correspondent known for unflinching integrity, a woman named Lena Marquez. Marla sent a secure message to Lena, attaching the first tranche of evidence, recordings, redacted logs, and detailed accounts of the unauthorized experiments. The message was simple but loaded. The past is alive. They need to know. The response came swiftly. Lena expressed her commitment to digging deeper, warning of the potential fallout. "This could shake the foundations of military research oversight," she wrote. "But it has to be told." Meanwhile, the atmosphere at Phoenix Valley grew charged with paranoia. Marla noticed subtle changes, conversations hushed when she entered rooms, unfamiliar faces appearing near her workstation, and increased security scans on her communications. Yet through it all, Marla remained focused. The silent war she fought was now becoming a beacon, drawing others who had suffered in the shadows. One evening, in the solitude of her quarters, Marla reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The erasure, the betrayal, the relentless fight to remain visible despite attempts to be forgotten. Her tattoo, once a symbol of captivity, had transformed into a mark of defiance. Each encrypted file, each whispered confession, was a testament to the resilience that no order could extinguish. She thought of her brother, the engineer lost to the project's failures, and the faces of the comrades who never made it back. Their silence was a chorus that demanded to be heard. Marla steeled herself. The release of the evidence would be the spark that ignited a reckoning. It was no longer just about her survival. It was about reclaiming truth from imposed silence. The drone bay lay in eerie silence, a cavernous hollow within Phoenix Valley Air Base where time seemed to stall. Long shadows stretched across cracked concrete as overhead fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, struggling to hold back the encroaching darkness. The once bustling hangar was now a mausoleum of forgotten machines and ambitions, harboring the ghosts of a weapon program that had promised revolution but delivered ruin. Marla Vega stepped cautiously across the bay floor, her boots echoing against steel beams and rusted equipment. The stale scent of oil and dust clung to the air, mingling with the faint metallic tang of cold machinery. Her gaze settled on a weathered drone prototype at the center, its sleek body scarred with dents and scratches, a monument to both human ingenuity and hubris. Faintly etched on a plaque nearby were the names of 7 engineers, comrades who had perished in pursuit of a vision that had spun wildly out of control. Marla's breath caught in her throat. Those names were etched into her memory, far deeper than the metal. She reached out, tracing her fingertips gently over the cool hull. The reflection of her tattoo shimmered in the dull sheen, a twisting double helix intertwined with mysterious glyphs, the bio-ID that had once marked her for erasure, now a silent testament to survival. Collapsing onto a battered crate, she allowed the weight of years to press upon her. The memories surged, the relentless tests that pushed mind and body beyond limits, the electric shocks that seared through her nervous system, and the devastating failure that had claimed lives, including that of her brother. She closed her eyes, the sting of tears sharp yet cathartic. "I thought silence would keep me safe," she whispered, But it only helped them forget that I survived. The ache settled into a cold resolve, no longer hidden. Marla's existence was a challenge to those who had tried to bury her story. Outside the hangar, the base was alive with tension. The publication of the explosive exposé had shattered the uneasy calm that had reigned for years. The headline, "Cancelled Weapon Revived in Silence. The engineer they tried to bury speaks," had spread like wildfire, igniting public outrage and governmental scrutiny. Phoenix Valley Air Base was thrust into the spotlight. Security protocols tightened. Every conversation was laced with suspicion. Investigators from the Department of Defense arrived in droves, their presence a constant reminder that the walls of secrecy were crumbling. Colonel Thomas Kincaid, once a figure of unchallenged authority, now found himself ensnared in a web of allegations. Accusations of falsified safety reports and suppressed warnings loomed over him like a dark cloud. His every decision was dissected, his legacy tarnished. Meanwhile, the young soldiers who had mocked Marla, filming her, laughing at her exposed tattoo and worn tank top, faced swift retribution. Removed from their posts and subjected to disciplinary hearings, they became symbols of a shifting culture that no longer tolerated disrespect or ignorance. Marla watched it all unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and caution. The fall of the powerful was not an end, but a beginning. In her quarters, Marla meticulously reviewed encrypted files, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she coordinated with a growing network of allies. Clarissa Miles, a trusted former colleague turned civilian analyst, kept her informed of legal maneuvers and media strategies. Lena Marquez, the indefatigable journalist, prepared the next wave of public disclosures. Together, they crafted a narrative that was both damning and hopeful, a call to accountability and reform. Marla's recordings, once clandestine whispers in shadowed rooms, were now weapons in a fight for transparency. One quiet evening, Marla sat by the window of her quarters, gazing out at the sprawling base bathed in moonlight. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lena. "The story is resonating nationwide. Veterans are reaching out. Support is growing. This is bigger than any of us imagined." A soft smile touched Marla's lips. The long road from anonymity to voice had been treacherous, but the path ahead shimmered with possibility. Her thoughts drifted to the comrades lost, to the silence they bore, and to the promise she had made to ensure their sacrifices were not forgotten. As dawn broke, Marla steeled herself for the battles yet to come. The silence was broken, the shadows receding. Justice was no longer a whispered hope but a rising tide, and Marla Vega stood ready to carry the fight forward. The morning sun crept over the horizon, casting a pale light onto the quiet streets surrounding Phoenix Valley Air Base. Inside the base's operations center, screens flickered to life as personnel began their shifts. But today something was different. A palpable tension thickened the air, heavy with uncertainty and suspicion. Across the country, the military and civilian worlds alike buzzed with a sudden, explosive revelation. The article titled "Cancelled Weapon Revived in Silence. The engineer they tried to bury speaks" had shattered the fragile veil of secrecy surrounding the Gorgon 7 program's forbidden resurrection. Lena Marquez's incisive reporting had sent shockwaves throughout the Department of Defense. Her piece detailed the unauthorized use of neural interface code on advanced drones, exposing a web of deceit, cover-ups, and the cost of silence. Back at Phoenix Valley, Colonel Thomas Kincaid's phone buzzed incessantly, each call a reminder of the storm bearing down. His usual composed demeanor faltered as he fielded urgent inquiries from superiors demanding explanations and immediate action. At 9 a.m. sharp, the base command center received a classified directive. All experimental drone operations linked to Project Gorgon 7 were to be suspended immediately. No exceptions. Security teams began shutting down testing bays, locking sensitive areas, and auditing personnel access logs. The once bustling labs now felt hollow, filled only with the echoes of hurried footsteps and whispered conversations. Marla Vega watched from a safe distance, her eyes sharp and unyielding. The wheels of justice were turning, but the path was fraught with peril. She recalled the weeks spent gathering evidence, the countless nights encrypting files, the silent resolve that had carried her this far. Then, an anonymous email landed in the inboxes of base command and investigative teams alike, sent by an insider with intimate knowledge of the covert operations. The message was concise but damning, a confession of unauthorized code use, detailed logs of experiments and warnings about escalating risks. The sender begged for intervention before disaster struck. The chain reaction was swift. At the Pentagon, emergency meetings were convened. Senior officials grappled with the implications. A secret program thought dead had been quietly revived, endangering both human lives and national security. Meanwhile, the base's morale frayed. Whispers of distrust and fear replaced the usual camaraderie. Technicians eyed each other cautiously, uncertain who might be the next whistleblower or the next scapegoat. Marla, despite the rising dangers, felt a quiet vindication. The truth was no longer confined to shadowed corners. It was pulsing through every nerve of the military establishment. Outside the command center, reporters and activists gathered, their voices merging into a chorus demanding accountability and reform. The story had crossed the threshold from hidden scandal to public reckoning, yet beneath the surface the fight was far from over. The powerful forces that once sought to silence Marla and erase the Gorgon 7 program were regrouping. The coming days would test courage, resolve, and the enduring power of truth. Inside Phoenix Valley's briefing room, Colonel Kincaid faced a sea of stern faces, high-ranking officers and civilian oversight officials who had flown in on short notice. The atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. Kincaid's usual composure gave way to tight jawlines and darting eyes. General Harper, a no-nonsense woman known for her unwavering dedication to ethics, opened the session. Colonel Kincaid, your failure to report the unauthorized use of neural interface code constitutes a breach of military protocol and endangers countless lives. Kincaid swallowed hard, nodding. Yes, ma'am, I take full responsibility for lapses in oversight. The room buzzed with murmurs. Kincaid's political capital was rapidly evaporating. Meanwhile, Marla was approached by a cadre of veteran advocates and legal experts. Their voices were resolute. Your courage to speak out has saved lives. The next steps will be difficult, but you will not walk this path alone. She listened intently, feeling the weight of collective resolve. In the weeks that followed, the base underwent a seismic shift. Drone hangars were shuttered, and experiments ceased abruptly. Personnel were reassigned or placed on administrative leave pending investigations. 3 soldiers who had openly mocked Marla's tank top and tattoo were officially reprimanded and transferred to a remote outpost, their misconduct making headlines. One of them publicly denied the allegations, but faced a barrage of criticism online and from military peers. One day, a young soldier named Reyes sought out Marla in the hangar's cafeteria. Nervously, he approached her. Miss Vega, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened, for the way we treated you. Marla looked up, meeting his earnest gaze. Without a word, she simply nodded and turned away. The moment was fragile, but it marked the slow thaw of hardened barriers. The Department of Defense announced new regulations requiring all military AI and neurotech projects to undergo rigorous ethical review by panels including veterans and medical experts. Among these reforms was a new directive colloquially dubbed the Marla Protocol, mandating oversight committees to include personnel with lived experience of combat and technological risk. Marla was invited to join one such committee, becoming a key advisor in shaping the future of military technology with humanity and accountability at its core. Her tattoo, once a mark of erased identity, now peeked confidently from beneath her rolled-up sleeve as she presented to government officials. Marla stood quietly amidst the transformation she had ignited, knowing this was just the beginning. The journey from silence to exposure had been perilous, but the seeds of change were sown deep. Marla Vega's story had broken through layers of denial and cover-up, lighting a path toward transparency and justice. As the sun set behind Phoenix Valley, casting long shadows across the base, Marla gazed toward the horizon. She was no longer alone, and the fight was far from over. The weeks following the public expose were a whirlwind of meetings, investigations, and shifting allegiances. At Phoenix Valley, the atmosphere was heavy with unease. Commanders whispered behind closed doors, technicians glanced nervously over their shoulders, and the very fabric of the base seemed to tremble under the weight of scrutiny. Marla moved through the base with quiet determination. Her role had expanded beyond that of a mere technician. She was now a symbol of resistance and accountability. Veterans and allies approached her with stories of similar silencing, of truths buried beneath bureaucratic stone walls. Each story strengthened her resolve. One afternoon, she received an unexpected message, a request for an urgent meeting from the base's new ethics oversight officer, Captain Reyes, a young soldier who had recently transferred from a logistics post after publicly apologizing to Marla. In a small conference room bathed in muted light, Reyes spoke candidly. "Marla, the culture here is changing, but slowly. There are still factions resistant to transparency. Some are working to undermine the investigation to protect their own." Marla nodded, her gaze steady. "We expected resistance. Change never comes easy." Reyes continued, "But the tide is turning. We've seen more whistleblowers coming forward, more internal reports of misconduct." Together, they outlined plans to build an internal network of support, trusted individuals committed to exposing corruption and protecting those who dared to speak out. Meanwhile, outside the base, the media spotlight intensified. Lina Marquez's follow-up stories detailed the human cost of unchecked technological ambition and the bravery of those who risked everything to reveal it. Social media campaigns rallied support for stricter military oversight, hashtag Marla Protocol and hashtag Truth in Tech. Public opinion began to shift, forcing lawmakers to take action. Congressional hearings were scheduled, and bills proposing comprehensive reforms of military AI and neurotechnology oversight gained traction. Back at Phoenix Valley, the repercussions reached every corner. Suspended personnel faced reviews, policies were rewritten, training programs were implemented to foster a culture of ethical vigilance. Yet, Marla knew the fight was far from over. Beneath the surface, old alliances still conspired to reclaim lost power. One evening, as Marla prepared to leave the base, a shadowy figure approached. An anonymous note slipped under her door, warning of imminent retaliation if she did not cease her activities. Undeterred, Marla passed the warning to her allies. "Fear is a weapon they've wielded for too long. We will not be intimidated." Her resolve inspired others, and the network grew stronger, bound by a shared commitment to justice and truth. As the sun set over Phoenix Valley, Marla stood firm, her tattoo a vivid reminder of past battles and future promises. The tide was rising, and with it, a new era of accountability. The military hearing room was stark and imposing. Rows of polished wood, stiff chairs, and a raised dais where a panel of senior officers and legal advisors presided. The room was suffused with an atmosphere of solemnity and consequence, the kind that settles over moments when reputations and careers hang in the balance. Colonel Thomas Kincaid sat rigidly at the defendant's table, his hands clenched tightly around a sheaf of papers. His usual composure was fractured, replaced by a mixture of anxiety and defiance. Around him the room murmured softly, some voices sympathetic, others coldly skeptical. At the front, the hearing chair, Brigadier General Melissa Warren, called the session to order. Colonel Kincaid, you stand accused of serious breaches of protocol, including failure to disclose critical risks associated with the Gorgon 7 program and deliberate manipulation of official records. How do you plead? Kincaid's voice was steady, though strained. I deny intentional wrongdoing, ma'am. All decisions were made in the interest of national security and operational integrity. The room's atmosphere tightened. Next came the moment everyone awaited, Marla Vega's testimony. As she entered the chamber, heads turned. Gone was the quiet technician. In her place stood a woman transformed by courage and conviction. Her tattoo peeked from beneath her rolled sleeve, a visible symbol of survival and truth. She approached the podium, her voice clear and unwavering. I am here not just to recount events, but to expose a culture of silence and deception that nearly destroyed lives and compromised our nation's security. She held up a small recording device. These are excerpts from internal meetings, proof of knowledge, concealment, and deliberate disregard for ethical standards. The panel listened as excerpts played, voices discussing risks, ordering silence, dismissing concerns. One chilling statement from Kincaid himself echoed through the room. She will never speak. On paper, she does not exist. A heavy silence followed. Some members exchanged glances, others looked away, unwilling to meet Marla's gaze. General Warren spoke next. Colonel Kincaid, how do you respond to these allegations? Kincaid hesitated before replying, I acknowledge errors in judgment, but maintain that national security concerns dictated my actions. Marla responded sharply. Covering up risks is not protecting security. It endangers lives. The hearing stretched on for hours with witnesses called to testify and documents scrutinized. The evidence was overwhelming. Outside the chamber, media crews and activists gathered, broadcasting live updates. The public's reaction was swift and vocal. Calls for accountability, reform, and protection for whistleblowers echoed across social platforms and news outlets. Kincaid's defense crumbled under pressure. By the hearing's end, his military career was all but over. Later that evening, a military broadcast aired the damning recordings in full, exposing the depth of the cover-up. The once powerful colonel was left isolated, a symbol of a system unwilling to face its own flaws until forced. Meanwhile, Marla's standing grew. Veterans, lawmakers, and the public hailed her bravery. Her story inspired renewed discussions on ethical governance in military technology. Yet, despite the victory, Marla remained cautious. She knew that true change required vigilance beyond the courtroom. As the lights dimmed in the hearing room and the city buzzed with the fallout, Marla stood firm, her tattoo a beacon of resilience and a reminder of the battles yet to come. The ripple effects of the truth spread wide across Phoenix Valley Air Base, touching every corner of the sprawling complex. What had begun as a quiet act of courage now sparked a tidal wave of accountability, shaking old power structures and exposing the fractures in a culture that had tolerated silence for too long. The three young soldiers who had once jeered at Marla's exposed tattoo and mocked her in the hangars found themselves under harsh scrutiny. The base's disciplinary board convened swiftly, tasked with addressing the misconduct that had gone unchecked for months. At the hearing, the soldiers' bravado cracked. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Videos of their taunts, witness testimonies, and the undeniable shift in command policy emphasizing respect and inclusivity. Private First Class Daniels, the most vocal of the trio, attempted to defend himself. It was just a joke. We didn't mean any harm. but his words fell flat. Major Reynolds, presiding over the board, responded firmly, "There is no place in our ranks for disrespect, especially toward those who serve with valor and sacrifice. This behavior undermines unit cohesion and morale." The verdict was clear. All 3 soldiers faced immediate reassignment to remote logistics posts far from the front lines. 2 of them chose to leave the military altogether, unwilling to confront the consequences of their actions. The third, Private Reyes, who had earlier sought Marla's forgiveness, accepted a retraining program focused on bias awareness and ethical conduct. Marla learned of their fates quietly, receiving official notices and informal messages. Her reaction was measured. She did not seek vindication, but rather hoped for genuine change. Yet, the public fallout extended beyond Phoenix Valley. Social media exploded with debates on military culture, respect, and the treatment of veterans and women in uniform. Hashtags like #RespectTheBadge and #MarlaProtocol trended nationally. Some voices called for harsher penalties for misconduct, while others lamented the slow pace of institutional reform. Amid the noise, Marla found solace in small moments of progress. One afternoon, as she passed through the base's cafeteria, she noticed a young technician watching her with tentative admiration. When their eyes met, he offered a shy nod, a silent acknowledgement of respect. Later, a letter arrived addressed to her, unsigned but heartfelt. "Your courage has opened doors we thought were forever closed. Thank you for standing tall when it mattered most." Marla kept the letter in her locker, a quiet reminder of the impact her story had made. At Phoenix Valley, new regulations were drafted and implemented with unprecedented speed. Military leadership mandated that all neurotechnology and AI projects incorporate veteran oversight and ethical review by personnel with first-hand battlefield experience. Training modules emphasizing empathy, respect, and inclusivity became mandatory for all ranks. The phrase "the Marla Protocol" began circulating informally, symbolizing the cultural shift underway. Despite the reforms, resistance lingered beneath the surface. Old-school officers grumbled about political correctness, and whispered doubts circulated about the efficacy of new oversight. But for Marla, these were battles already won. She continued her work in the maintenance bays, her tattoo visible as ever, a living emblem of resilience. One evening, a fellow engineer approached her hesitantly. "Miss Vega, I wanted to say thank you, to make it clear that respect isn't optional, that we all have a part in this." Marla smiled softly. "We all do," she replied. The days ahead promised challenges, but also hope, and with every step, Marla's silent strength paved the way for those who would follow. The halls of Phoenix Valley Air Base were no longer the same. The once familiar corridors echoed with a new energy, one of cautious optimism and reluctant acceptance. The air was thick with the scent of change, as the institution grappled with the seismic shifts that Marla Vega's revelations had triggered. At the center of this transformation stood the newly instituted Marla Protocol, a groundbreaking framework mandating rigorous ethical oversight of all military artificial intelligence and neurotechnology projects. The protocol required that any such endeavor include veterans, individuals with real-world battlefield experience, as integral members of ethics committees and project oversight boards. The protocol's implementation was met with a mixture of support and skepticism. Some hailed it as a necessary correction to decades of unchecked technological ambition. Others bristled at what they perceived as an unwelcome intrusion of emotion and personal history into the cold calculus of defense strategy. For Marla, the invitation to join the advisory committee was both an honor and a heavy responsibility. She entered the sterile conference room where the panel awaited, representatives from the Department of Defense, civilian oversight agencies, medical ethics boards, and veteran advocacy groups. The meeting began with formalities, but quickly shifted into substantive discussions about the future of military technology. Marla spoke with measured authority, drawing from her experience as both engineer and survivor. "The stakes are too high to allow technology to outpace conscience," she asserted. "We must anchor innovation in humanity." Her words resonated, cutting through jargon and politics. She proposed concrete measures, mandatory psychological assessments for all personnel involved in neurotech projects, transparent reporting channels protected by whistleblower safeguards, and periodic public audits to maintain accountability. As the committee deliberated, Marla found herself navigating complex political terrain. Resistance came from unexpected quarters, budget hawks wary of increased oversight, commanders concerned about operational security, and technicians defensive about their autonomy. Yet she remained undeterred. Outside the formal meetings, Marla's presence began to shift attitudes across the base. Junior soldiers who had once whispered about her tattoo now approached with questions, seeking understanding rather than mockery. In one encounter, a young female recruit named Raina lingered after training, her eyes lingering on Marla's exposed shoulder. "Miss Vega," she began shyly, "may I ask about your tattoo? What does it mean to you?" Marla smiled gently, the afternoon sun casting warm light across her skin. "It was once a mark of survival and silence," she replied, "but now it's a warning and a promise that the past will not be forgotten and the future must be guarded with care." Raina nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the weight of those words. Leadership also took note of Marla's influence. Colonel Sanders, newly appointed base commander, invited her to lead workshops on ethical technology integration, signaling a shift from punitive to educational approaches. Marla embraced the role with quiet dedication, crafting curricula that blended technical training with lessons on empathy, history, and moral courage. Her sessions became a gathering point for veterans and new recruits alike, bridges between generations united by service and the pursuit of better futures. At night, Marla often reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the shadows of erased identity to the forefront of reform. She kept a small photo on her desk, a faded image of the 7 lost engineers, a daily reminder of the cost of silence. Her work was far from over. Back at the hangars, the once distant hum of drone engines returned, but now under the watchful eyes of the Oversight Committee, including Marla herself. New protocols required every test flight to be reviewed, every data point scrutinized for ethical compliance. The changes were painstaking and slow, but undeniable. One afternoon, Marla received a message from Captain Reyes, the former soldier who had publicly apologized. "I'm grateful for the path you've paved," he wrote. "I'm committed to upholding these standards for those who came before and those who will come after." Marla replied simply, "We rise by lifting others." Her influence extended beyond Phoenix Valley. Across the Department of Defense, similar protocols began emerging, inspired by the blueprint she helped create. Advocacy groups credited her with humanizing the conversation around military tech ethics, shifting focus from abstract risk assessments to lived experience and moral accountability. Despite the progress, challenges persisted. Some projects still skirted regulations, others faced bureaucratic inertia. Marla remained vigilant, balancing her technical duties with her advisory commitments, always mindful of the fragile nature of reform. One evening, as she walked through the base, she passed a mural painted by local artists, a vibrant tribute to veterans and innovators alike. At its center was a depiction of a woman with a double helix tattoo on her shoulder, standing tall amid swirling symbols of technology and humanity. Marla paused, her heart swelling with quiet pride. The tattoo was no longer just her own story. It had become a beacon for many. Phoenix Valley Air Base stirred with anticipation. The announcement of a new ethical standard, named after Marla Vega, was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a bold step toward rebuilding trust in military technology. The Marla Protocol promised oversight rooted in experience, transparency, and human dignity. Marla stood before an assembly of military leaders, engineers, veterans, and media representatives. The room was filled with a mixture of admiration, skepticism, and hope. For years she had been a quiet figure behind the scenes. Now she was the voice leading a vital conversation about the future of warfare and ethics. Her speech was measured but resolute. We have seen what happens when innovation outpaces conscience, when the price of progress is paid in silence and sacrifice. The Marla Protocol is our commitment to ensure that technology serves humanity, OT the other way around. She outlined the key pillars of the protocol: mandatory inclusion of veterans on all AI and neurotechnology oversight committees, rigorous psychological and ethical screening of projects, whistleblower protections with real enforcement, and transparent reporting mechanisms accessible to oversight bodies. The audience listened intently as she emphasized, this is not just policy, it is a pledge to those who serve, to their families, and to the nation that we will not repeat the mistakes of the past. Implementation of the protocol was a complex undertaking. Marla became a linchpin in coordinating among military branches, government agencies, and civilian ethicists. Her days were filled with intense meetings, technical evaluations, and policy drafting sessions. At Phoenix Valley, new training modules were rolled out. Soldiers and technicians learn not only how to operate cutting-edge systems, but also to recognize ethical dilemmas and speak up without fear of reprisal. Marla spearheaded a mentorship initiative pairing seasoned veterans with new recruits, fostering an environment of respect and shared responsibility. The tattoo on her shoulder, a mark once stigmatized, became a quiet emblem of resilience, inspiring others to embrace their scars and stories. Not all reactions were positive. Budget officials questioned the cost of expanded oversight. Some commanders feared the protocol would slow critical deployments. Yet Marla navigated these challenges with determination, arguing that the integrity of the mission depended on ethical rigor. One tense meeting saw her facing a panel skeptical of oversight's impact on operational readiness. She responded, "True strength lies in knowing the limits of power. Our technology must reflect our values or it will betray us." Her words resonated beyond that room, gaining traction among policymakers and advocates. As the protocol took root, its effects rippled outward. Congressional hearings invited Marla to testify on the necessity of human-centered technology governance. Media coverage highlighted the protocol as a pioneering model for military reform. Veteran organizations embraced it as a victory for dignity and accountability. Marla traveled to defense forums, universities, and conferences, sharing her story and the lessons of Gorgon 7. Each appearance reinforced the growing consensus: ethics and innovation must advance hand in hand. Back at Phoenix Valley, the culture transformed gradually. New recruits approached Marla with questions seeking guidance. One young woman named Raina once asked about the meaning behind Marla's tattoo. Marla's reply was simple: it was once a warning, now it's a promise. Her mentorship helped nurture a new generation of soldiers and engineers committed to integrity. The base, once shadowed by secrecy and silence, became a beacon of reform and hope. Despite the progress, Marla remained vigilant. She knew complacency could undo hard-won gains. Budget cuts, political shifts, and technological pressures threatened to erode oversight. Yet, each challenge reinforced her resolve. She continued to advocate tirelessly, knowing the true test of the Marla Protocol lay not in words, but in sustained commitment. As the sun set over Phoenix Valley, Marla reflected on the journey from the hidden scars of erased identity to the forefront of ethical leadership. Her path had been arduous, but with every policy enacted, every voice empowered, she saw the promise of a better future. Her tattoo glowed softly in the fading light, a symbol not just of survival, but of transformation. The late afternoon sun cast long, amber shadows across the sprawling hangars of Phoenix Valley Air Base. A soft breeze stirred the leaves at the edge of the compound, carrying whispers of a season's change. It was in this quiet moment that Marla Vega walked the familiar paths she had once tread as a technician, but now as something more, a mentor, a symbol, a living testament to the power of resilience and truth. Her tattoo, once a mark of erasure and silence, now peeked boldly from beneath the sleeve of her uniform shirt. The double helix intertwined with cryptic symbols was no longer hidden. It glimmered softly in the light, a symbol transformed, much like the woman who bore it. Inside the bustling maintenance hangar, a fresh group of young soldiers and engineers worked diligently, their faces a mixture of eagerness and uncertainty. Among them was Raina, a young recruit whose eyes often lingered on Marla with a mix of reverence and curiosity. Raina's journey had just begun, but the stories she had heard about Marla already inspired a quiet determination within her. One afternoon, as the crew gathered for a briefing, Raina seized a moment to approach. "Miss Vega," she began hesitantly, "I've been meaning to ask about your tattoo. It's unlike anything I've seen. What does it mean to you?" Marla turned, offering a warm, gentle smile. "It means many things," she said, her voice soft yet steady. "At first it was a burden, a reminder of things I wish to forget, scars hidden beneath layers of silence and fear. It marked a part of me that the world tried to erase." She paused, her gaze distant as memories flickered behind her eyes. But over time, that same mark became a promise to never let silence win, to carry the truth forward, to protect those who cannot speak for themselves. Raina nodded, absorbing the weight behind the words. "It's powerful. I hope to carry something like that, something meaningful." Marla placed a reassuring hand on Raina's shoulder. "You already do. Every action you take, every voice you raise, that is the mark of true courage." As days passed, Marla's role expanded far beyond technical repairs and calibrations. She became a teacher and a guide, leading sessions that blended rigorous technical training with lessons in ethics, empathy, and history. Her approach was refreshingly personal. She wove tales from her own life, the battles fought on foreign soil and within shadowed halls of command. She shared the cost of silence and the strength found in breaking it. During one session, a group of young engineers listened intently as Marla described the Gorgon 7 project, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a call to action. This technology, she explained, had the potential to save lives, but without accountability, it became a weapon against the very people it was meant to protect. Our duty is to ensure that it never happens again. Questions followed, probing technical details and ethical dilemmas. Marla answered candidly, fostering an environment where dialogue and critical thinking thrived. Outside the classroom, Marla's presence was equally transformative. Soldiers who had once whispered judgments now sought her counsel, recognizing in her not just experience, but integrity. Captain Reyes, once one of her harshest critics, now stood beside her as an advocate. Their partnership symbolized the healing possible when openness replaces disdain. Together they organized workshops on bias recognition, emotional resilience, and ethical responsibility, cornerstones of the Marla Protocol's philosophy. The influence of the Marla Protocol reached far beyond Phoenix Valley. Invitations to speak at defense forums, universities, and international conferences poured in. Marla's voice, calm, grounded, and unwavering, became a beacon in conversations often dominated by technical jargon and abstract risk assessments. At a prestigious conference, Marla addressed an audience of military leaders and technologists. "We stand at a crossroads," she said. "The future of warfare is intertwined with artificial intelligence and neural technology. Without a foundation of ethics, these tools can dehumanize and destroy." Her words were met with nods and thoughtful silence. She concluded, "It is our shared responsibility to ensure that innovation honors humanity, that technology serves peace, and that we remember those who bear the cost." Yet, progress was not without obstacles. Political shifts, budget constraints, and entrenched bureaucracies sometimes slowed the pace of reform. Marla navigated these challenges with a blend of pragmatism and principle. She understood that lasting change required patience and persistence. During a tense meeting with defense officials skeptical of oversight's impact, she stated plainly, "Compromise is necessary, but never at the expense of our values. Without ethics, innovation is hollow." Her conviction swayed many skeptics, forging unexpected alliances. Back at Phoenix Valley, cultural change blossomed gradually. The base that had once been a crucible of secrecy now embraced openness and dialogue. Training programs incorporated ethical decision-making simulations. Leaders encouraged transparency and protected whistleblowers. Marla's mentorship program flourished, fostering camaraderie and mutual respect across ranks and disciplines. She took pride in watching recruits like Raina grow, eager, thoughtful, and committed. In quieter moments, Marla reflected on her journey. From a hidden survivor bearing forbidden marks to a guiding force in military ethics, her path was defined by resilience and resolve. Her tattoo, once a silent scar, had become a symbol of empowerment and change. It was a legacy she carried with humility and pride. One crisp autumn evening, as twilight painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Marla stood outside the hangar, watching the horizon. The future remained uncertain, full of challenges and complexities, but she was ready. Her story, her tattoo, and her mission would continue to inspire those who dared to stand for truth and justice. And with every step forward, she honored the promise etched in ink, the promise that no one would ever be erased again. The morning sun gently bathed Phoenix Valley in warm light, signaling not just a new day, but a new era. Marla Vega stood quietly, looking over the base she had helped transform, not just physically, but culturally. Her story was no longer hers alone. It had become part of a greater movement, a call to ensure that technology and ethics advance hand in hand. The Marla Protocol was only the beginning. Across military bases, government offices, and defense labs worldwide, conversations about the human impact of technology were changing. Marla's voice had become a guiding presence, reminding leaders and engineers alike that behind every system lies a responsibility to the people it affects. At Phoenix Valley, a new generation was trained with this ethos. Veterans mentored recruits, sharing wisdom born from experience and hardship. Raina, once a nervous newcomer, now led her peers with confidence, embodying the values Marla instilled. Though new challenges loomed, advances in AI, cyber warfare, and autonomous systems, the lessons of the past provided a foundation for responsible innovation. Marla knew the path forward required constant vigilance and courage, but with the right principles, change was possible. Outside the military, Marla's influence spread too. Schools began teaching ethical technology development. Companies sought veteran insights and communities learned to honor stories of survival and resilience. Her tattoo, once a mark of silence and erasure, had transformed into a symbol of hope and accountability. Marla continued her work quietly but determinedly, balancing roles as technician, mentor, and advocate. She understood that her journey wasn't over. The fight for ethical progress never ends. But as she stood watching the sun set over the airfield, she felt ready. Because the ink on her shoulder was no longer just a scar from the past, it was a beacon lighting the way toward a better future. This legacy belongs not just to HR, but to all who choose to stand visible, speak truth, and protect justice. The story continues. As we bring this story of Marla Vega to a close, the echoes of her journey linger, a testament to the quiet power of resilience, the fierce courage of the unseen, and the enduring quest for justice. Marla's path was never easy. It was carved through shadows of silence, pain, and erasure, a path that many would have chosen to abandon. But she did not. She bore the weight of secrets not hers alone, scars etched deep beneath her skin and within her spirit. Her tattoo, once a forbidden mark, became her armor and her banner. It tells a story beyond ink and flesh, a story of survival, of standing tall against forces determined to keep her invisible. And in that standing, she found strength not just for herself, but for countless others. This story is more than one woman's fight. It is a mirror reflecting the struggles of many who serve in silence, veterans, whistleblowers, those marginalized and erased by systems designed to overlook them. It asks us to consider, how often do we look past the visible? How often do we fail to see the battles fought quietly behind closed doors? Marla's journey challenges us to open our eyes and hearts, to listen without judgment, and to honor every story, no matter how quietly told. In a world moving faster than ever before, technology surges forward with breathtaking speed. But progress without conscience is a perilous path. The Gorgon 7 program was a stark reminder of the costs of unchecked ambition, of lives altered, of trust broken, of futures jeopardized. Yet through Marla's courage and persistence, a new chapter begins. The Marla Protocol stands as a safeguard, a framework reminding us that ethics must walk hand in hand with innovation. It embodies a promise that no one who serves will be erased, silenced, or forgotten. At Veteran Biker, we hold stories like Marla's close, because they illuminate the parts of humanity too often hidden, the grit beneath grace, the strength beneath scars. We tell these stories not to sensationalize pain, but to reclaim dignity, to remind ourselves and the world that behind every uniform, every job title, every surface, there is a person worthy of respect and recognition. If this story touched you, if Marla's resilience inspired you, please show your support by liking this video and subscribing to Veteran Biker. Your engagement helps bring these stories to life and fosters a community where truth and courage are celebrated. We want to hear from you. What part of Marla's journey resonated most deeply? Have you or someone you know faced moments of invisibility or injustice? How did you or they find strength? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. Your voice enriches this community and helps break the silence that too often surrounds difficult truths. Remember, the battles that change us aren't always loud. Sometimes they're fought in the quiet moments, the steady refusal to give up, the courage to be seen, the strength to speak. Marla's tattoo is more than a symbol, it's a beacon for those who carry hidden scars, a beacon for those still searching for their voice. As you watch the next videos on your screen, keep in mind, every story has power. Power to change perspectives, power to heal wounds, power to ignite change. Together, through stories like Marla's, we build a world more compassionate, more just, and more human. Thank you for joining us at Veteran Biker. Thank you for standing with the quiet heroes. Thank you for believing in the power of one voice, one story to make a difference. Until next time, stay strong, stay visible, and keep telling the stories that truly matter.